Consequences of joint liability. First, vitiated consent of the part of one debtor doesn't affect the others. It simply explains that intelligence in consent is vitiated by error, freedom by violence, intimidation or undue influence, and spontaneity by fraud. As example, A and B are joint debtors of C for 1 million pesos. A's consent was obtained by C through fraud. B would still be liable for 500,000 pesos, while A will not be liable since the two debts are considered distinct from each other. Second, the insolvency of a debtor will not increase the liability of his co-debtor. From the personal defect of a particular debtor or creditor will not affect the obligation or rights of the others. Example, A, B, and C are joint debtors of D for 3 million pesos. A is insolvent only for 1 million pesos his share of proportionate, wherein the demand made by one creditor upon one debtor produces the effects of default only as between them, but not with respect to the others. It seems like connected to Article 1156, an obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. The last consequences of joint liability is wherein there is a surety in contrast to a co-debtor may invoke all the defenses available to the principal debtor. This of partners. It arises out of a contract, the liability is a joint or pro rata. Second, if it arises out of a crime or quasi-delict, the liability is solidarily. It simply means that if the dependents of an employee claim compensation for the employee's death in line of duty. This of agents. The agent can exclude his personal liability by expressly providing in the contract not to occur personal liability. Duties of co-principal in agency solidarity. Abilities of husband and wife. Every husband has the obligation to provide for the sustenance of his wife. It is the husband's duty to look after her basic needs and comforts, and for wife responsibility is the payment of personal debts contracted by the husband or the wife before or during the marriage shall not be charged to the conjugal partnership except as they rebounded to the benefit of the others. Liabilities of violators of human relations, solidary. Liabilities of employer and employee of the Letters of Tortious Act is explained by this kind of the basic law wherein the employer is vicariously liable for the negligent and wrongful acts of his employees that are committed within the scope of employment. Article 1209 applies to joint indivisible obligation because the prestation or object is not susceptible of division and solidarity is not provided. Joint obligation. Indivisible refers to the object it is the physically divisible into different parts, while the joint refers to the tie between the parties who are proportionately liable. Characteristics of indivisible joint obligation. First, when a joint obligation is divisible, each joint obligor is bound to perform, and each joint obligee is entitled to receive only his proportion. When a joint obligation is indivisible, joint obligors or obligees are object to the rules governing solidary obligors or solidary obligees. Second, demand must be made on all the joint debtors. It simply explains that as between themselves, joint debtors are liable in equal share unless the contract or the law provides otherwise. 1. A joint indivisible obligation gives rise to indemnity for damages from the time any one of the debtors does not comply with his undertaking. If any joint debtors be insolvent, the other shall not be liable for his share. It simply means that when one of the solidary debtors cannot, because of his insolvency, reimburse his share to the debtors paying the obligation, such share shall be borne by all his co-debtors in proportion to the debt of each. If there be joint creditors, delivery must be made to all. It simply means that the debtor fails to comply, the creditor has the right to have the obligation performed by himself or by another, at the debtor's expense and to recover damages. Each joint creditor is allowed to renounce his proportionate credit. It simply means that each creditor, if there's several, is entitled to a proportionate part of the credit. 7. No creditor or can act in a representation of others. It means that a representation as to the credit of a third person. The last one is no debtor can be compelled to answer for the liability for others. It means that the debtor can be held liable for the delay or default in the other. 1210, an indivisible obligation is one where the prestation or object cannot be performed by parts without altering the essence or substance. Divisibility refers to the subject matter, while solidarity refers to the tie between the parties. Examples: joint divisible obligation. A and B are jointly liable to X for 1 million pesos. It means that when a joint obligation is divisible, each joint obligor is bound to perform. Each joint obligee is entitled to receive only his proportion. Indivisible obligation. A and B are jointly liable to X, this car. It means that when a joint obligation is indivisible, joint obligors or obligees are subject to the rules governing solidary obligors or solidary obligees. C. Solidary divisible obligation. A and B are solidarily bound to give X a 1 million pesos. It means that obligation to give definite things, those which are not capable of partial performance, and those that are provided by the law to be indivisible even if it is physically divisible.